Chase Meidroth isn't going to solve all of the White Sox problems. However, his call-up provides hopefully the first sign of better things to come, and let's discuss on today's episode of Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and the site expert of SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the Fansided Network, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already, and also follow or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Well, it seems like service time was the only thing keeping Chase Meidroth from getting called up. Today is the first day teams can call up prospects without burning a year of club control. So here is Chase. Let's discuss how the team's number 8 prospects call up at least provides the first sign of better days to come. Then I want to discuss Lance Lynn's recent criticism of the organization and how it really feels like old news. And finally, let's go over what to watch for when Boston comes to town. Well, the White Sox scored just 3 runs in 27 innings against the Cleveland Guardians. The Sox rolled out Lenyn Sosa yesterday at second base, who needed just 2 hits to get his average to 229. Jacob Amaya, he started at shortstop yesterday. He struck out twice. His slash line is now 103, 129, 103. If he didn't have such a good glove, he likely would have been cut by now. Sox offense didn't hit a home run on the road stand. The team's OPS is 592, good for 28th. So something has to be done to upgrade the offense. And now that Chase Meidroth cannot accrue enough service time to burn one of the 6 years of club control, the White Sox can start turning to one of their promising prospects to help boost the offense. Also provide some hope of better days to come since the White Sox are in the middle of an early season 8-game losing streak. And oh, by the way, they are at the exact same spot record-wise as they were in 2024 at this point in the season. They were 2-10 on April 10th, 2024 after losing to the Cleveland Guardians. Fast forward 365 days, and the White Sox are 2-10 after losing to the Cleveland Guardians. So yeah, maybe it is time to sell some hope. And I discussed on yesterday's show how it would have been nice, maybe the Sox called up Kyle Teal or Edgar Caro to cover for while Corey Lee is on the IL. But I get why they went with the veteran in Omar Narvaez, and I explained that on yesterday's show. But in this case, now is the time to start bringing up a promising prospect who can project to at least be a productive big league player. Now look, Chase isn't going to solve every single problem that the White Sox have in the lineup. And while on base usually doesn't win Rookie of the Year, to sacrifice even the possibility of getting another draft pick, if he somehow did win Rookie of the Year for the sake of more club control, though, is organizational malpractice. So I have seen the criticism of the White Sox going on in White Sox social media world that basically the White Sox kept Chase Meidroth down to make sure that they didn't have to burn a year of club control. And that is organizational malpractice. Even though one of the reasons why he is down in Charlotte, it was he just didn't earn the job out of spring training. And also, manager Will Venable said, look, you do have to drive the ball. Like, you do have to swing the bat sometimes. So he did need to work on some things. But he did show after like 6 games, he should have been up. And with the offense scuffling so badly, yeah, he should have been up probably a few days ago. And it's only because of club control manipulation that he was down at Charlotte and he's now only coming up now. And basically the White Sox have sacrificed any potential opportunity to get another draft pick to add another promising prospect to this rebuild. If by somehow, even though it was a slim chance it would happen, he could have won Rookie of the Year. Just because they want 7 years of Chase Meidroth when no one knows what club control is going to look like in the CBA, in the next CBA. I mean, the owners are, trust me, folks, and I've had this argument with other people before. The owners are not going to be able to have their cake and eat it too if they want a salary cap and still 6 years of club control in the next CBA. It's not going to happen. They have to give up something if they want to get their ultimate goal of a salary cap, which I don't even think they're going to get. I think they're going to have to settle for maybe the NBA model at the very least. Or even then, because effective negotiation, and in a previous life, I have negotiated stuff. Effective negotiation is just knowing what are your retreat points. to at least get something acceptable. And even then, I would say the owners might have to retreat to just, maximum years on contract, like get rid of the 14-year deals. Like guys can only sign for 4 or 5 years, but even then players are going to say, fine, you're going to minimize how many years I can sign. I want to get to free agency faster. So that's where I think it's organizational malpractice, even though the chances of him winning the Rookie of the Year might have been slim. But Chase Meidroth, and I don't mean this also as a disrespect, but Meidroth's ceiling is just solid everyday baseball player. So that's why, looking at this as like he's the savior, no, it's not that. This isn't the Sox calling up their Bobby Witt Jr. centerpiece of the team. And I'm not even sure they have that guy yet. I'm not sure they have their Bobby Witt Jr. Their, bona fide, certified stud that is going to be who they build around for the next 10 years. And again, that's not disrespect to Kyle Teal or Edgar Caro. I'm really excited about them. Brady Montgomery, George Wolcott, they have a lot of high potential too. They could be those studs, but it's still very early in the process. You just don't have that guy where you're like, that guy, he's the dude. He's Frank Thomas. He's Robin Ventura even. They've got some guys that at least their floors are very good supporting cast players, and that's what Chase Meidroth is. Colson Montgomery was supposed to be that guy, but that shine is, dimming very, very quickly as he's hitting under 100 at Charlotte. And he was scratched from yesterday's game. Not sure if it's an injury. I haven't seen any update. I doubt it's a call-up because I doubt you're going to call up a guy hitting 081. But there's really nobody right now, positional-wise, that you could say, that guy's going to be a Hall of Famer. He's going to be the centerpiece of our team for 15 years, even if Jerry doesn't pay his guys. That's going to be the guy that Jerry finally gives a $100 million contract to. That type of stuff. Like Luis Robert Jr., Eloy Jimenez, Yohan Moncada. I mean, again, Teal, Caro, Montgomery, Wolcott, even Brian Ramos, they Chase Meidroth. These are guys that obviously, could be centerpieces of the core of a good team, but I don't think they're the lead guys yet. That type of stuff. Maybe Caro. Caro's got the potential, I think. But again, it's not like, hey, that type of thing. But however, the next great lineup is going to need those types of guys. Just like it's going to need Meidroth. So that's why, you can use this as the first sign of maybe better days are happening. Maybe better days are to come. The Sox have been trying to replace Ray Durham at second base, and he left town in 2002. That's almost a generation he's been gone. And Meidroth can finally be the solution since he can play solid defense there, and he can do a needed trick just like Ray could do in the lineup. The only difference is Meidroth gets on base, where Ray was super fast on the bases, and had a little bit of power. He was supposed to be the next Joe Morgan, fell very short of that, but he was still a productive player. And yes, I am excited about Meidroth's old school money ball ability to get on base, along with his 60 grade hit skills, because the ideal lineup at right field needs a guy like that in the order. And I don't care if I sound like a broken record. I will advocate until I'm blue in the face. The best lineup construction for right field and the White Sox, and you should construct your roster to your park since you play 81 games there. That's 81 opportunities to get wins. Is you have 5 power bats with plate discipline, adding them to the mix, 3 bat-to-ball skill guys who can get on base, and ideally can also run, and whatever you can get from your catcher who has a defensive focus. And if you look at the 1993 lineup, and you look at the 2005 lineup, it had all that. And those lineups still play well to the modern game. What I'm describing still plays well to the modern game. Do damage. And if you can't do damage, get on base, let the next guy do damage. And Meidroth can at least fill one of those bat-to-ball skill guys' role, although he's not really a speedster on the base path since his run grade is 45, which is considered, fringe average on the grade scale. And hey, I'll even admit I may be overrating him when I call him the modern-day Greek god of walks. Barely lifting off the bat off his shoulders was one reason Venable said he needed to go to AAA, because, the pitching is a tick better at the majors. You do actually have to sometimes swing at pitches up over, especially pitches in the zone, and do damage. You basically have to, he kind of did have to recalibrate. I know Venables said, they don't want to change the foundation of him because Chase's foundation is just get on base. I've had guys on the show, other, prospect experts talk about him. Chris Clegg, he was on the show months back talking about it. Yeah, Chase, it's hard to get him to even lift the bat, as pitchers were saying. And you can do that in AAA because, again, the command just isn't quite as good as it is, in theory at the majors. Some guys just don't have their command, obviously, every day. We saw that with Jonathan Cannon yesterday. But you do have to switch your outlook to do damage first and then look to walk at the big league level. Where in AAA, the margin for error is obviously bigger. You can be like, you know what, I'm just going to keep my bat here because I know this guy's probably going to throw 4 balls before I get 3 strikes, where it's the flip at the major league level. And plus, the book will likely be pot him with strikes because he's too patient. And he cleared that bar at AAA by driving the ball more in those 9 games. And the other reason why maybe I'm overrating, you can think I'm overrating him, but to me, he has 3 bars to clear at the big league level. The first is, drive pitches worth swinging the bat at. 2, prove you can still be an on-base machine. Because remember, I had B-Flow from the 108.com on the show a bit back, who did say, pitchers find ways to trick you into swinging at bad pitches. So can he still show that great plate discipline? And then 3, play solid defense at second. And I'm going to keep advocating for him to play at second, as I've even seen in the brief sample size with my own eyes what scouts are likely seeing. He just doesn't have the range at short like he does at second. So with Montgomery scuffling at Charlotte and getting scratched last night, I want to see what Brooks Baldwin and Meidroth can do. What Brooks Baldwin can do at short and what Chase Meidroth can do at second. Although I doubt they're going to go that route. It sounds like, it looks like Will Venable really wants Baldwin to be that super utility guy. But man, I would like to see what can Baldwin. I think Baldwin has done enough where I'd like to see what could Baldwin be. The next that shortstop on the next competitive team. And then with Meidroth, let's see what those 2 guys can do. And I guess I'm also being a bit excited because you and I finally have a player that will be on this current roster who likely will be on the next projected competitive team that everyone is hoping it comes as soon as 2027. I mentioned on yesterday's show, not many guys on that 2027 team are on this roster as it stands April 11th, 2025. Baldwin could be in that super utility role. And he might be another bat to ball guy at short if Colson Montgomery busts, as it's starting to trend that way. But otherwise, maybe Sean Burke and Shane Smith in a yet to be determined starting rotation roles based on if Noah Schultz, Hagen Smith, and Grant Taylor do come up and they all realize their potential and they all stay healthy. I mean, maybe if you squint, you could see Miguel Vargas. Who knows with the bullpen? Possibly if Mike Vassell keeps pitching decent, he's your long relief guy. Jonathan Cannon obviously is looking more and more like a 5th starter every day. However, again, he might get pushed out of the rotation if Schultz, Smith, Taylor, Burke, Shane Smith all realize their potential and they stay healthy. And that also could push out Davis Martin. So you can see why folks are a bit excited for Meidroth, at least, even if he may not reach an all-star game, he at least might be capable of helping this team do this thing called winning. Former Sox pitcher Lance Lynn was never one to mince words, but his recent criticism of the organization may feel like it was something scathing, but only outside of Sox world. So I want to discuss his comments being more, tell us something we don't know, Lance, and that is next on Locked On White Sox. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is a reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and their latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trainmaster program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And if you can't get the show on YouTube, Locked On White Sox is available on all major podcast platforms, so make sure to follow or subscribe on places such as Apple or Spotify. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me. All right, so Lance Lynn has always been brutally honest. He's never minced words, especially when he goes on foul territory. You know, the now retired former White Sox all-star pitcher made an appearance with former White Sox great A.J. Pierzynski and his crew. And for the most part, it was Lynn just going over his decision to finally hang it up, his plans for retired life, etc. You know, they went over how he's got a golf simulator in his basement, so he can basically golf now. You know, Pierzynski asked, is there any amount of money that'll get you to come back? And he said it would be a lot. So, you know, it's just basically all that other, you know, the stuff that you do when a guy just recently retires and he's talking to other players that are retired. But he was asked to go over his time with the organizations he's played for, and he was complimentary to the Cardinals, although he said the organization went from the Cardinal way to the Sabermetrics way, and the organization has basically lost its way. And he's hopeful they can blend the two. He was complimentary of the Twins. He was complimentary of the Rangers. He wasn't toward the White Sox. And now, for those outside of White Sox world, it came across as, oh, here's a former player blasting the organization for being behind everyone, as Lynn described. And trust me, I got that perception from someone outside the White Sox fan base thinking, this is a huge hot take. Look at him. He's ripping the Sox. They're dead last. Yeah, they're behind the time. But to those in the White Sox fan base and even in the organization, it was just tell something we already don't know. This isn't a hot take. This isn't scathing. We know. We've been watching this train wreck. Lance got off in 2023. We're still on it. We're still, for some reason, can't turn away from looking at the train wreck. I mean, unless you look at it as another indictment of Chris Getz, and even then you think, yep, tell us what we don't already know. We know he was overpromoted. But here's what Lynn said on his appearance on Foul Territory regarding the White Sox. Quote, obviously Chicago is behind everybody. It's just the honest truth. There's a lot of great people there, but when it comes to the top to bottom organizationally, like even the minor leagues coming up, I went down and spent a month rehabbing my knee there, and I stayed with the AAA team. And just seeing the way things were going about, there definitely needs to be some changes. And there still probably needs to be some changes just by going off of some of the things I've heard and seen. End quote. Maybe someone should tell Lynn there has been changes since 2023, and it wasn't just Chris Getz getting promoted to the GM job in the worst GM job search in the history of baseball. It wasn't Kenny Williams and Rick Hahn getting fired. You know, and in fact, it was all Chris Getz has been talking about in the offseason. You know, obviously, guy was promoted. He obviously has to promote that over signing players because his owner didn't authorize him to spend much money to upgrade a roster that lost 121 games. But since Lynn left, the Sox have added probably the most forward-thinking pitching mind in Brian Bannister as a director of the team's entire pitching. Heck, Bannister can even read the room, as he told James Fegan, if the owner won't pay for pitching, then you got to keep drafting and developing it. Novel concept. It's one reason why they drafted Hagen Smith with the number 5 pick. Bannister knew they're not going to pay Garrett Crochet, so we basically have to replicate him with the next prospect that projects like Garrett Crochet, which was Hagen Smith. And Getz even got Reinsdorf to embrace sabermetrics a little bit more. And obviously I had former Mississippi State College World Series hero Tanner Allen on the show a while back going over how baseball should not be too nerdish. But you do need, and even he said, you need trend data And you need analytical data to help identify why, this is not my commentary, more not his words, but you need analytical data to help identify why a player is struggling, or at least provide a full scouting report on whoever you have in your system or want to get. But yes, you should add the eye test. So it's not like Jerry was completely wrong by saying, hey, we should still be scouting. He was wrong in just believing in super scouts. Super scouts don't work. You need to blend everything. And especially as Tanner Allen said, trend data is great. If a coach knows, hey, this guy's going to throw second pitch slider. Okay. Now the hitter knows. Okay, I'll just sit on the first pitch and boom, there's the second pitch slider. He's going to hang it over the plate. I'm going to send it over the wall. Also, the team is now top 10 in defensive runs saved. And my eye test keeps seeing more guys are positioned correctly. Novel idea. How do you get that? Trend data. So Getz even brought in some more adults in the room, like Will Venable, to manage, with the idea of, hey, maybe not only should he be the manager of the team, but maybe he should be my partner in shaping the big league roster, especially since Will Venable had a year apprenticeship with Theo Epstein, the greatest baseball executive of all time. You got Ryan Fuller as the director of hitting, bench coach Walker McKinven as a new school guy, as your bench coach. And while, again, I'm not trying to defend the White Sox here because they deserve every single piece of scrutiny until proven otherwise, maybe Lynn just wasn't aware of what was going on. And that's why we're all like, okay, tell us something we don't know, Lance. And I forgot who tweeted it, and I thought that was probably the only take in Sox world where I'm like, yeah, okay, maybe that's a hot take, was, he's talking about the minors. Well, guess who was in charge of the minors when Lance Lynn was rehabbing his knee at Charlotte? Chris Getz. But again, Chris Getz got promoted without the owner interviewing anyone else, and everybody in Sox world was mad about it. And we all know, okay, he was overpromoted. We know that. And we all know right now the only box that Getz checks is he did the easy part of saying there's a lot of problems here. Hey, Jerry, maybe we should make these changes. However, if Lynn is going to point the finger, he better realize three fingers are pointing right back at him. As I like what James Fox of Future Sox tweeted out. I got the tweet up for those watching on YouTube, at JamesFox917. I don't think anyone who's been paying attention to the hashtag White Sox closely needed to hear that's a poorly run organization from Lance Lynn. It's not a secret. And he didn't exactly help while he was in town either. And remember, it was reported by ESPN's Jesse Rogers and Buster Olney on how toxic the 2023 clubhouse got, and that Lynn was part of it. And here's the context. Liam Hendriks, when the team's most prominent pitching star, is distinctly an extrovert, loud, friendly, accessible to the media, chatty. Three organizational sources said a rift had grown between Hendriks and some of the other veterans on the team, namely pitchers Kendall Graveman, Lance Lynn, and Joe Kelly. In December 2022, Hendriks was diagnosed with cancer. He went through treatment in the spring of 2023 before making his way back to the team. In late May, the White Sox front office planned a welcome back news conference, and the team arranged for players to be in the room as Hendriks spoke with the media for the first time, an elementary show of support. Some veterans initially balked, and according to club sources, had to be talked into attending. The situation, one longtime White Sox staffer believed, was one of the worst things he had ever witnessed in professional sports. And you don't need to jump to conclusions, Matt, to likely know who some of those veterans were. We're like, I'm not supporting a guy I'm not supporting Hendriks. I don't like him. I don't care if he had cancer. I mean, come on. You may not like a guy, but you don't want to see a guy die. And that's what Leon Hendriks was potentially facing, and he overcame cancer. And this also isn't the first time Lynn has bashed the organization after leaving it. He backed up Kenyon Middleton's scathing comments in 2023 after Lynn was dealt to the Dodgers. So the only thing I want to know is then what is Lynn hearing that there's still probably more changes need to be made in the organization? Because by all accounts, and I've had folks closer to the Sox and closer to the situation on the show, like all three Sox beat writers and Sun Times, Kyle Williams, MLB.com, Scott Merkin, and the Tribune's Lamont Pope, plus Baseball Isn't Boring's Courtney Finicum, or Elijah Evans of Just Baseball, both who were at spring training. And all reports have been, all the changes have been made, have been positive. So to me, this was Lynch just recalling his days with the Sox and not having the context of things have changed after he left. Well, Garrett Crochet is set to make his return to Wright Field. Let's discuss his return and how the Boston's TV crew basically said out loud this team is looking as a get right series. And let's discuss the Red Sox coming to town next on Locked On White Sox. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode and recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox or wherever they get their podcasts, as this show is available on all major podcast platforms. And we have officially hit the 1 year mark together. This, I recorded my first episode April 11th, 2024, when the White Sox were 2-10 after losing to Cleveland. And Yoan Moncada got injured and he was lost for the season. And now the White Sox are 2-10 after losing to Cleveland, although nobody got injured. And Chase Meidroth has been called up, so we've got at least a little bit of sign of better days, maybe. Well, Chase Meidroth does get a chance to show the Red Sox what they could have had, although Boston had a good reason to trade him to Chicago since they did get Garrett Crochet back. And Crochet gets a chance to show the White Sox what they're missing. I would say use the Game Time app to get tickets to this Sunday's game, as you do not want to miss this one. And that is when Crochet is tentatively scheduled to go to toe the Sox Park mound for the first time in a different uniform. Crochet comes in on a heater too. He has a 1.45 ERA in 3 starts, with just 3 earned runs allowed and 17 strikeouts. And what makes his return even better on Sunday is rookie sensation Shane Smith opposes him. And he's given off that same potential stud vibes Crochet gave off last year. And, that's the first thing, obviously, to watch for in this series is that duel. And it's also going to be a nice data point in Smith's development and seeing how he fares opposing a true stud. I mean, Blake Lively, he's had a fine season. He had a fine season last year. Pablo Lopez, also a fine pitcher. But I don't see many teams trading 4 of their top 30 prospects, including 2 in the top 100 overall, and giving them a $170 million contract extension. Because that was the cost Boston paid to get Garrett Crochet. So the hope is Smith just pitches his game. Try to be like, I got to be even more amped up. Pitch your game, young man. And if Boston has the book on him now and they think they've got him solved, is he ready to make the adjustments to the adjustment? But I am super psyched for this one. I would say block out. I would actually say watch the game. Tune in. I hope Smith meets the moment. That's another thing. Another developmental point that we can see. Can Smith meet the moment? Because I have a feeling Crochet is going to meet the moment. On the other side, it seems like the Red Sox might be psyched for this weekend's matchup, at least according to the TV broadcast. Awful Announcing pulled this. I can't share, obviously, the TV clip, but they have the video. I can share the tweet, and I've got it up for those watching on YouTube. This is at Awful Announcing. Quote, the White Sox invent ways to lose games, end quote, Dave O'Brien. Quote, the trip to Chicago could be coming at the perfect time, end quote, Will Middlebrooks. The Red Sox announcers are excited about their upcoming trip to Chicago. And Dave O'Brien's the play-by-play man. Will Middlebrooks is their analyst. And basically the context was they were talking about how the White Sox lost 6-1 while Boston was still playing the Blue Jays. And like, hey, the White Sox lost. And Will Middlebrooks brought up, hey, did you see how they lost on Wednesday? And Dave O'Brien was like, yeah, I saw that. And they were talking about that. And that's the context. And Boston is off to a 7-7 start. So maybe the context, though, is more of this is a great way for the Boston to pick up 3 victories to keep pace in the tough AL East. And especially after they dropped 3 of 4 home games to their rival, the Toronto Blue Jays. Because otherwise, it's not like it's a total, man, Boston needs to play the White Sox to completely get right, because their team OPS is ranked 12th. All of their regulars seem to be off to good starts. The calendar turned to April, and Rafael Devers is 15 for 35 after starting the season 0 for 19. So, it's more of, hey, this is a great opportunity to get 3 wins. And obviously that means Boston would likely be extending the Sox misery, as the Sox are in the middle of an 8-game losing streak. But the Sox have a chance to, at least against Boston's 2 starters, to maybe finally end this losing streak. Boston's rolling on Friday, Sean Newcomb. Saturday is Richard Fitz. Both of their ERAs are over 4. Newcomb's is over 5. So you'd like to see Davis Martin show he's making the adjustment too, whereas Jonathan Cannon failed in yesterday's game. So that's another thing to watch for. And also maybe Martin Perez goes Saturday. When he goes on Saturday, maybe it would be nice if he can continue his strong start and basically be like, okay, we're ending this losing streak. If Davis Martin can't lose it, can't stop it tonight. And also, let's see if Meidroth can give the Sox offense a boost. And then I look forward to seeing how Shane Smith duels Garrett Crochet. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, all season long. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. I'll be back on Monday to discuss how things went over the weekend against Boston and provide another Minor League Monday report. Feel free to leave, and I might do a crossover with Locked On A's, so I'm working on the time of when we're going to do that. But feel free to leave comments about today's discussion regarding Chase Meidroth getting called up, providing a signal of better days to come, Lance Lynn's criticism of his former team, and the White Sox taking on the Red Sox this weekend. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at Todd J. Dub, or at Locked On Sox, or you can email me at lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. Have a great day, have a great weekend, and I will see you tomorrow, or Monday.